Alrighty. Part two of Encyclopedia Brown for you guys. Really cool story. One of my favorites. I told you in part one. A lot's going on in the aquarium, but this mystery is going to be solved by Encyclopedia Brown and by a little thing that we like to call science. All right, you guys all like science. You're going to learn a little bit about reptiles, amphibians, lizards, and salamanders. Alrighty, so for part two, I'm just going to do a quick little recap of what's going on from the first part of the story, and then we're going to continue on part two. In Idaville is where the story takes place. It is very similar to your own hometown because it has churches, movie theaters, bike paths, ordinary houses, a police chief, just like really any town that we have, just like Deerfield, Schuyler, Utica, any of those areas. They all have homes, they all have churches, they all have restaurants and the police force and firefighters and everything like that. So Idaville is very similar to a real life story, and the main character of our story is Encyclopedia Brown. What is the main conflict or the biggest problem in this story? Because remember, we're talking about finding details and kind of drawing our conclusions and kind of taking all the information and figuring stuff out. So what is the main conflict of our story? And I'm going to cite a little details to help give you some background knowledge, and then I'm going to start reading our story. If you remember, the main conflict or the biggest problem in the story is Fred. Now, you might be asking, who in the world is Fred? Okay, we're not talking about Freddie Mercury, okay, for all you Queen fans out there. We are talking about Fred the Tiger Salamander, okay? That Tiger Salamander has been stolen from the local aquarium in Idaville. Chief Brown, the police chief, is on top of it, but he is so confused and he does not know what to do to solve the mystery. But he does not know how to solve the case because he doesn't have a strong science background. Now, someone that they might know, Leroy Brown, also known as Encyclopedia Brown, might be able to help out his own father in solving the mystery. So we are going to figure out what happened to Fred the Tiger Salamander that was stolen from the aquarium. If you remember, there was three people that were possibly guilty. You had Sam Main, you had Mrs. King, and you had Dr. O'Donnell. Those are the three. Okay, so I'm going to start off on page 152. And remember, Dr. O'Donnell was there working, I believe, on an alligator from Australia. So his name kind of checks off and he's okay. So we're down to those two, Mrs. King and Sam Main. So 152. Chief Brown frowned. Actually, Sam Main seems very suspicious of Mrs. King, he confided. And after talking with her, I can see why. Mrs. King is fascinated with salamanders. Fascinated with salamanders? Mrs. Brown echoed. Chief nodded. She told me that she has dozens of them at home for pets, and that Fred is the first tiger salamander she's ever seen. Suspicious. He shook his head. Mrs. King does seem odd. She thinks salamanders are sacred creatures with magical powers. It's crazy, but we'll see what happens. So we're right in that paragraph where it says encyclopedia. Encyclopedia spoke up. In ancient times, people used salamanders for medicine. They also believed that salamanders could eat fire and live in flames. Maybe Fred wasn't stolen for money, Mrs. Brown said thoughtfully. Maybe Mrs. King took Fred just because she thinks he's a special specimen. Last paragraph on that page. That's exactly what I've been thinking, Chief Brown admitted. But there's no proof that Mrs. King had the opportunity to steal Fred. So there's no real proof yet. She was with a group of school children from 10:30 until 11:15. So 10:30 to 11:15. So that's 45 minutes. Okay. After that, she went over to the cafeteria for a coffee break. One of the cashiers said that he had saw her there. So Mrs. King seems that she's very interested in salamanders. She has so many at home, over a dozen, right? She has a dozen salamanders at home for pets, and she's never seen a tiger salamander like Fred before. However, she spent some of her time during the supposed stealing with school children, which I feel like doesn't really sound like a person that would be stealing stuff. And then she went for a coffee at the cafeteria, and a person cashing her out, said that she was there. So, it's not Dr. O'Donnell. Still could be Mrs. King, but there's no proof yet. And then there's Sam Main. We got to figure out what's going on with him. All right, we're on page 153. Chief Brown sighed with frustration. I hate to admit it, but this case has me baffled. Baffled, which means like confused, not sure. I just don't know who it is, basically. Encyclopedia closed his eyes. His parents watched him hopefully. They knew that when Encyclopedia closed his eyes, it meant that he was doing some of the deepest thinking ever. A moment later, Encyclopedia was ready. He opened his eyes and asked his one question. Has Sam Main been working at the aquarium very long, Dad? Actually, he was hired only 2 weeks ago, Chief Brown answered. But he has a lot of experience. Sam told me he's been taking care of salamanders and other lizards for more than 19 years. That was all Encyclopedia needed to hear. He knew what had happened. Oh no, he hasn't, Encyclopedia declared with a satisfied smile. If he's a lizard expert, then I'm the Queen of England. What does he mean by that? Like he's saying, oh, if Sam Main's a lizard expert, then I must be the Queen of England. Like, you got to be kidding me. That is not absolutely true. Sam Main is lying, and I can prove it. How does Encyclopedia know? So if you remember Mr. McQueen, before you flip to the next page, Mr. McQueen was talking about knowing a little bit about science with lizards, reptiles, and amphibians, and salamanders. We talked a little bit about our vocabulary words. Here is where it's going to come into play. This next page. All righty. Page 154. Here comes the solution to our problem, or the solution to our conflict. The case of the slippery salamander. Top of the page. Encyclopedia knew that Sam Main was lying because he told Chief Brown that he'd been taking care of salamanders and other lizards for more than 19 years. Anyone who'd been taking care of salamanders for that long would know that a salamander is not a lizard. They are classified as amphibians. So a salamander is an amphibian, and lizards are classified as reptiles. Sam Main admitted stealing the valuable new tiger salamander that morning. After he returned Fred to the aquarium, he was fired from his job as the caretaker. So, using what you've learned from the selection, explain how attention to detail can have. Well, my good friend Encyclopedia Brown used his knowledge of science and knowing that a salamander is actually an amphibian. Okay, and Sam Main said that, oh, I've been taking care of salamanders and other lizards for 19 years. Well, a lizard and salamander are not the same thing. So that's how Sam Maine was guilty, and that's how we solved the case of the slippery salamander. All right, a couple salamander facts for you on the next page. All right. The class, what does that mean? Like, what is it grouped in? Like, we're grouped with mammals, okay? Catfish are grouped in the fish category, okay? So class, it says members of the amphibian class, salamanders have to live in wet environments. All amphibians are cold-blooded animals with a backbone, or vertebrae like we have, that spend part of their time on land and part in the water. We went over that yesterday. Salamanders need to breathe air and drink water through their skin. Okay, so that's how they are able to survive, is that they can drink water and breathe air through their skin. The size of a salamander, how big is a salamander? Salamanders are measured from their heads to the end of their tails. Most are small, ranging from 1 to 5 inches. The pygmy salamander can be as small as 1.5 inches. The Chinese giant salamander, look at that picture on the bottom right, that's it, can grow to be over 5 feet long. Holy cow. That is taller than most of you. Whoa, that is one big salamander. I would not want to see that salamander anywhere. The habitat. Salamanders inhabit every continent except for Australia and Antarctica. What does that mean? So you can find salamanders in every continent except for Australia and Antarctica. Why don't you think you can find them in Antarctica? Well, I'm going to tell you, they'd probably be frozen because it's very cold in Antarctica. The range, okay, can you find these animals? The range. They live in any damp area, like a pond, a swamp, a forest, in holes, or under rocks. Appearance, or what do they look like? Their skin is smooth with spots or stripes. They are usually dark colored, but some are red or orange. They do not have scales, ears, or claws. Okay, and the last part, how long can they live, or what is their lifespan? Most live for 8 to 20 years. Some live more than 50 years. So that's a big lifespan, but for an animal, if you think of it, right? All right, 8 to 20 years. Some can live up to 50. That's insane. All right, let's go on to those questions that we go over every week on page 156. Okay, 156. The Think Critically questions. Number 1, it says, Encyclopedia Brown is a detective story. The main character is a child detective. Think of another story you read about child detectives. Tell what the detectives do to solve the mystery in the story. So I kind of did it in part 1, a little bit of our story, and we talked about my good friends, Shaggy, Scooby, Velma, Freddy, okay, and can't remember the other one, but those are some children or kids that help solve mysteries every week in your TV show or on when we would watch it during snack. Okay, so what do they do to solve the mystery? They do something very similar to my good friend Encyclopedia Brown. What they do is they find all the details that they know already, okay, whether it's something that happened in the story or happened in the show, but then they use their background knowledge of things that they already know about. Okay, you know, the person that's very good at that in Scooby-Doo is Velma. Velma is very intelligent, okay, and she's usually the one that helps pinpoint who she thinks it really is, and then Freddy uses his trap-making skills to trap them. All right, number 2. As I said earlier, Idaville is not a real place, but the author includes many things that seem real or, in fact, true. Find at least 3 details that the author uses to make Idaville seem like a real town. We did that earlier, okay? So we kind of already went over this question. We said that it has like seaside towns have churches, 2 car washes, 3 movie theaters, bike paths, great fishing spots, things like that, okay? Question 3. As the plot develops, as the story continues, okay, you meet several different characters. Which character is the main character in the story? Who is the main character in the story? I'm not answering that. You're going to answer that in the comments. Okay? Your job is to answer that question in the comments. Who is the main character in this story? Okay, and how do you know? Okay, so who's the main character and how do you know? And then the last part is, what is the problem in the story and how is it resolved? So, a couple questions there for you. Main character. Someone come up with that answer for me in the comments. Who's the main character in the story? Okay. 2. Second part of the question is, how do you know this person's the main character? Think about it. Isn't the main character usually the person that talks from the beginning of the story to the end of the story, kind of goes through about the whole story? The story might even be named after the main character. Okay, and 3, what is the problem in the story? We went over it. What is the problem in the story at the beginning of this video? And how is it resolved, or how does the main character solve this problem? Tell me those answers in the comment section of this video, and I'll be extremely happy, and maybe I'll even give you a little bonus points. All right, we're going to skip number 4. We're going to go down to number 5. It says, look back at page 151 and 152. Why does Chief Brown suspect Mrs. King of stealing the salamander? So why does he think Mrs. King stole the salamander? Well, Mrs. King usually, in this story, has tons of salamanders as pets, over a dozen in her own house. And she's never seen a tiger salamander like Fred before. So he tried to put 2 and 2 together to say that, okay, she likes salamanders, she has them as pets, never seen a tiger salamander like Fred before, and maybe he took her, or maybe she took him. Okay, well, that's why he accused her of being the guilty one, but it was not her at all. It was Sam Main. Alrighty, so make sure you try and answer that question 3. I'll have the questions in the comment section for the video. Again, this is the end of your weekly story, so try and finish those packets by the end of the week. And tomorrow, I'm going to bring you a nice little read aloud of one of Mr. McQueen's favorite chapter books. All right, see you then.